Hi there, busy bees. I'm Summer.
I'm Carolyn.
And welcome to our vehicle. Today we're trying our first in-vehicle video. So we have it securely attached to the emergency handrail there, angled at a ways so Carolyn can keep her eyes on the road and just look over once in a while. Here we go. So we were just talking about saying no. I know in society women really have a hard time saying no. We're not raised to resist pretty much anything, right? And that shows up in rape culture, where men use that to their advantage against us. And you always hear stories of women who get into assault situations, but before it happens they can feel the hair standing up on the back of their neck, or they have some kind of gut feeling, yeah, that something wrong is going on. I remember watching Oprah, especially. She did quite a number of episodes, let's say, about rape culture and police and stuff. Anyway, a number of women actually knew in advance that something was wrong and didn't pay attention to it. And so all that's just to say that, and that's not blaming anybody. It's like in our society we're not often saying no, flat out no. And Carolyn is really good at saying no.
I have to build up to it so much that it comes out aggressive sometimes.
I wouldn't say aggressive, it's like super blunt. Straightforward. Yeah, blunt. Like she's like, no. and I would say I admire the fact that you're able to do that regardless of the gender of the person who you're having to say no to.
Having my own business, so my staff, I get in a protective mode. I've had to say no to male customers who are inappropriate. And I think when I started the business and it was just me, I just did them. But then when it came to like having my staff do them, there was a protective, mother bear thing that came out, and that's partly where I learned it. There's old guys that like want to come in and like give everyone a hug, and it's weird, and like, he like knows a friend of the family, so people kind of excuse it because he's like 70 and it's harmless, it's just a hug, but it's weird, it's inappropriate, and it's too intimate, and
happening in a workplace.
Yeah.
And the girls don't want to make a scene, and nobody's saying no to him, so everybody feels obligated. So yeah, so you've had a number of situations like that where you've had to tell customers, I'm sorry, but you're not welcome here anymore. So yeah, you're really practiced at it. Yeah, and when I used to run workshops and stuff, this was like an active part of, we would talk about having a hard time saying no, but also practice saying no. And it always felt weird and sort of contrived. But you know how athletes practice whatever Olympic or whatever sporting event they might be doing? Muscle memory is a real thing. And so after a while, you just start becoming comfortable with it.
People who respect my boundaries, I'd like to learn to say it in an eloquent way.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because there's a lot of people that don't, right? Like in that example at the shop, that guy was not respecting boundaries because had he checked in with himself, or like, that's why it feels like he had an agenda, right? Because obviously to other people, the girls didn't want to have to do that, so he wasn't respecting boundaries, which is like the most important thing.
When I first learned to say no, I was younger, and as younger women, they're not taken as seriously by anyone.
Yes.
And so now realizing I am older, and I can try to learn to do this in an eloquent way also.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really good role modeling for younger women. And like, it's not just men that don't observe boundaries, right? And I grew up in a household where I was never told no. We didn't have any rules. There were no boundaries either, but my parents often said, maybe, which makes it like, you know, like that's everything was maybe, even when it might be yes. My parents didn't want to disappoint us, so they would say maybe, so we wouldn't get our hopes up. But what that did was,
You're never sure about anything.
yeah, it was like everything was up in the air. It was a bit chaotic. Like my household was a bit chaotic to start with, but so having grown up in a household that I was never told no, and then now married to a person who has no problem saying no. And I have worked on that like over the years, but I'm, you know, even at this point, it's still hard for me to hear like just cut off no, because I'm all about the gray area. Things in my life are not so black and white. I'm more comfortable when people have open minds.
Well, and the social worker in you, to make sure everyone's heard before there's any, and everything is a cooperative decision. And
Yeah. So even now when she says like a hard no, that comes down like, it feels like a sledgehammer. And I mean, I think that's a great tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah, but I don't need to use it so often.
Yeah, you know, you could reassess, and like not so much with customers, I think, but maybe with the girls, with the employees. I shouldn't call them girls. I say girls in a loving way. I don't, not in a derogatory way at all. So I understand the debate about women and girls.
I think it's girls because like we're protective of them, even though they're women.
And it's like a little family. It's a community.
And they're not younger than me either. Like
no. Well, one is.
Talking about muscle memory, and I like, I know this is kind of backpedaling a little bit, but the when I did have to confront those men, I had to write down what I was going to say to them, practice it out loud, think of the things that they would say back, and figure out a way to say it that I wasn't asking them for any. Oh, that's where the hard no came in, because I don't want to get into a debate or a fight with this guy. Just like, you know, you're making us uncomfortable. You may think you're just being friendly, but we're uncomfortable. This is where we work. We're going to be comfortable, and you'll need to find somewhere else. You know, like I'm not saying like, if it was just like, we don't really like the hugging, then his response back would be like, oh, I'm just trying to be friendly. Like I didn't want to leave. That was where the hard no came from. I didn't want to leave any room for response. This is not okay. You need to leave. I didn't want to be emotional when I said it. I wanted to be calm.
In your power.
Yeah. I was completely emotional. Like my heart would be racing.
Sure, of course.
But I wouldn't show it because I had practiced it.
That's so awesome. And anybody can do that with anything. Like, you know, for example, with your kids or your partner or your boss. I mean, you want to be careful with your boss.
It's usually they're pissed, but they just leave.
I know you were worried about them coming back at you, but did it work like really effectively, or did they still resist a little bit?
Like I didn't do it when they were halfway through a haircut. It was like, okay, that guy was inappropriate. The next time he comes in, I'm going to put it down. Like, and I think like the one guy actually went to the police station and asked them about his history and asked them what our rights were, and he's just like, well, you can't really put a restraining order for just that yet, but you could write a formal letter. So I just made it a little bit more formal for him.
But I think that is like such an important step, because you know, in my life also, I had somebody sexually assault me when I was 17, and I didn't recognize at the time that like it was in broad daylight, standing at a bus shelter, waiting for a bus at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon at a mall. And it just, the situation happened, or maybe he created it that way. He waited, perhaps. But anyway, somebody grabbed me and then was inappropriate with me and released me. But afterwards, when I told a friend, then she told me, that's sexual assault. Did you go to the police? And I didn't, of course, because I didn't know. She was educating me that was sexual assault. But I think your point of going to the police and asking, I mean, you're working in a small town, so I don't know how appropriate or willing the police are, but that kind of puts that guy, if he wasn't already on the police radar, that definitely puts him on their radar. It's sort of like, oh yeah, we know this guy.
And just to be clear, he didn't touch anybody.
No.
He was just talking in an aggressive manner, and he just gave us the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
Like the police can't act, like they won't actually do anything.
No.
If you just get the heebie-jeebies, but to go to them and like, you know, they just kind of said, well, write him a formal letter that you don't want him to be at the shop anymore.
Yeah. But going to the police and asking for suggestions, what's the word I'm looking for? Something that they would recognize, because now there's a paper trail. Advice. You're seeking their advice on ways to handle this in a legally responsible way that takes care of yourself, your business, and your employees. So I think that was so
And he was
smart.
good. He's like, he left his name. Like, he left me his name, the police officer. To say, like, if there's something comes up, call me.
Right.
Which was nice.
Yeah, because he'll remember you coming in.
I mean, we were definitely on guard for probably the next month. Like, careful walking to cars and stuff.
Right. Like, is he gonna do
like,
something now?
It seemed like there was a bit of maybe, you know, mental instability there. There's some planning required in learning to say no. It doesn't come naturally for women, and it feels really weird the first couple times, and sometimes it's confusing, like you feel bad about yourself because we're taught to be polite, and it's not a polite thing to do.
Because society, not just men, but society then treats women who are strong and stand up for themselves, then you become a bitch, right? And a lot of us worry about that kind of impact. Like, if that's the price to be paid for standing up and being strong, then accept it being called a bitch. If that's what it means to be a bitch, somebody who is strong and powerful and not willing to compromise on the things that are really important to them.
But like, I've just had reactions to people, like guys who are inappropriate, and I just like screamed back profanities.
Yes, I've done that too.
So like, that doesn't feel as strong.
No, no, because that actually, you come across as a victim and scared. In debates and stuff, they don't lose control of their emotions. They stay grounded and calm.
Which takes a ton of practice.
And a lot of energy, just as you were saying, like inside,
inside,
you
like, the heart's racing. I feel like I'm vibrating, but it has to stay calm and just...
Yeah. Because
that's what actually comes across as strong.
That's right, when you're like grounded. I read recently, and I don't know how reliable this is, but I think probably I read it on Facebook as one of those memes, and it said, men's worst fear is that women will laugh at them, and women's worst fear is that men will kill us, right? And even if that isn't like a statistically gathered
there's some truth
idea, there's a lot of truth in that for me anyway. I've spent a lot of my life in fear, not knowing it, but being brash and like a bitch, especially up until I was like 25, really like having to feel like I had to really push, you know, and come back at people. Up until I was 25, I was a bitch.
I really can't picture it at all.
Oh, ask anyone that knew me back then.
We'd love to hear your comments about times where you've had to say no, where you wanted to say no and you didn't, tricks like or how you practice to say no. Tell us your stories. We would love to hear your stories, and I share them with everybody.
Yeah, and if you have been sexually assaulted or in any way your boundaries have been crossed, please seek some help. Go to the police if that is right for you, or go to get counseling, or talk to a friend or a parent, or and somebody that you trust, a teacher if you're in school.
All right, I think it's time we head out. Let's go, Lesbo.
We're going. All right, please comment, share, like.
We love you guys.
Follow, we want this to be a community, so we really genuinely want you to comment and share, okay?